All right, everybody. Well, I am so thrilled to be welcoming Blair and Cameron here. These wonderful women have put together just a great book in Kentucky, y'all, and this is our second KMHA Book Club selection for 2026. And so I hope everybody has been reading or has their book or is getting ready to read this after they hear this exciting presentation. But I'm just going to do a brief introduction to our wonderful speakers. Uh, just some housekeeping notes for today. I'm dropping in the chat information about our other upcoming programs, so feel free to check those out. You can always visit our website, kymuseums.org, to find out what's new with KMHA, what we've got coming, and we'll have an announcement about our 2027 conference location coming soon. You know, it's going to be in Eastern Kentucky, but we haven't told you where yet. So that's coming soon. But we're really fortunate to have Blair and Cameron here. Blair Thomas Hess is a born and bred Kentuckian who grew up traveling and learning about the state with her family. Today, she works to promote the Commonwealth's culture and traditions in order to teach others about her home state. She lives in Frankfurt with her daughter and husband. Cameron and Ludwick calls Kentucky her birthplace and Lexington her hometown, though she now lives in North Carolina. She never misses an opportunity to remind residents in her home state now that everything good came from Kentucky first, which is great. Together, these longtime friends are the authors of 4 travel books about Kentucky, including My Old Kentucky Road Trip and The State of Bourbon. You could follow their travel journeys at myoldkentuckyroadtrip.com or on Instagram at myoldkentuckyroadtrip. So we will take questions at the end of the presentation, but you can also drop questions or comments into the chat at any time. I'll be monitoring that. And Blair, Cameron, take it away.
Yeah,
Let's
thanks
go.
so much, Jessica. We really appreciate it. I met Jessica at a book event in Frankfurt. We had the pleasure of sitting next to each other all day long, so she got to listen to all of my Kentucky stories. So hopefully we have new ones today for you, Jessica. But thank you so much for having us. We're excited to talk about Kentucky all with you, and also just really to talk about how we got started, not only in writing books, but got started in our interest in Kentucky. So Cameron and I have known each other for a very long time, middle school, I think, probably, which
Yeah, I
we
think
will
that's
be
right.
polite and not tell you how long ago that was. But we have known each other for a very long time. So we kind of have just a casual, freehand sort of way about us anyway. And so this will be pretty casual as we go through this. It's just kind of something we like to talk a lot. We
We
like to
riff.
talk pretty fast. We like to interrupt each other. And so hopefully you enjoy. But if you have any questions, please feel free to drop in the chat and we'll kind of address them as we go. But yeah, Cameron and I started traveling together when we finished. We've traveled together for many years, but always for fun and for pleasure. When we finished college, I got a job working in Nashville, Tennessee, and I moved there. And Cameron was working in Lexington, and we were looking for ways to kind of connect and meet together in the middle. Where could we go explore, do something that we had never done for a weekend? And we were just looking for kind of adventures like that. So our very first road trip that we took was to Mammoth Cave. And the reason our very first road trip was to Mammoth Cave is because we discovered at 23 years old, I don't know, 20 something years old, that Cameron had never been to Mammoth Cave. Now, as Jessica mentioned in her intro, I'm a 7th generation Kentuckian. I don't know how many generations Cameron's got in her, but it's several. And it just seemed like pretty horrible to be a Kentuckian and to never have been to like our state's only national park. This, massive. I mean, Mammoth Cave is the longest cave system in the world, and not like a little bit the longest, right? I think the second longest cave system is in Mexico. It's an underwater cave.
Mhm.
I always say it wrong. It's like Sakaktoon, I think. It makes me think I'm saying something from the Mummy movies.
Sure.
I think it's Sakaktoon. It's an underwater cave system in Mexico, and it's 230 something miles. Mammoth Cave is 410 discovered miles. And of course, they're adding to that all the time. And Cameron just casually, like, I don't know, I missed the field trip. I never went. So we started traveling together, and in traveling together, discovered that while I wanted Cameron to be alone in this, she wasn't. There were a lot of Kentuckians we met on these early road trips, where they had not been. They had vacationed, as kids or as adults with their families other places outside the state. When spring break came up or summer break came up, they drove to the beach or they flew to a different destination. They didn't necessarily get out around Kentucky, drive to parks in their home state, explore our state parks, our natural wonders, our historic destinations. And so Cameron and I kind of thought, well, I mean, we could do this. Like, we could help people do this. So it was sort of a happenstance discovery, that got us started, and we started traveling together. So Mammoth Cave was first and a whole Cave City thing. I think Waverly Hills was second, and I'm
I
sure
think that's
Cameron,
right.
you remember it better than me, so I'll let you jump in.
Yeah, and I will say Waverly Hills in Louisville, that was one that Blair probably still carries the bruises of me clinging to her, because it is one of the most haunted buildings in the US, and I don't do well with scary things.
I've
So,
just I've never met someone who's like, I don't like ghosts or haunted things. Let's go to
but
Waverly
let's go.
Hills Sanatorium. It's like, that sounds,
But let's go.
but
And like Blair said, it was you spend all this time doing vacations, I guess, with your family, and so often folks go out of state that you miss these opportunities to see what's right there. We had done kind of the things around Lexington, especially where we both grew up and went to school, the little field trips and things, but nothing really to the extent. And by the time we were, in our early 20s, I was pretty coming to terms with the fact that I was quite a history nerd also. So for me, it was a really good excuse to kind of like dig in, and I love going down a rabbit hole, and to really get to learn this stuff, beyond just the surface of it. And so, like Blair said, we started kind of taking these trips. Our initial thought was to maybe start a YouTube channel.
there
Wink.
there are a couple of YouTube relics that we will not tell you
We
how to
won't click
find.
that link.
That were, if you see them, you'll quickly know why we did not start a YouTube channel.
Thank goodness. But we both, we did okay with the writing. Blair's got a journalism background, and I'm an English person. And we had another friend who had been kind of this 2000s blog boom. So we're like, okay, let's blog about it.
We can
Um,
blog.
we can blog. And the blog actually took off in a way that we didn't expect. This was like right before all of the Kentucky for Kentucky, Kentucky Kicks Ass campaigns. Nobody was really becoming an influencer yet. We weren't trying to be influencers. We just, wanted to do these things and take some cool photos and share it with others. And I'll shout out here at the moment, that I think every photo that you're going to see was either taken by Blair or the majority by her husband, Elliot Hess, who is a photographer for UK Athletics now. So we were very lucky that Blair married well into photography.
We used him a little bit.
We did use him, and we appreciate his work so much. Yeah, so and I think what really did it for us was when the castle in Versailles caught on fire.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, the blog started to explode with hits because nobody had really published anything about the history of the castle and what it was. And so all of a sudden, our traffic sort of spiked, and we were seeing all of these new eyeballs, and it really became a lot of fun, just to find things that we didn't know about that we wanted to share, or things that we had known about but took for granted. I did a lot of volunteering at the Carnegie Center in Lexington. And so it was a lot of fun to sort of say, okay, well, now there's all this stuff around Gratz Park in Transylvania. Let's go see what that is that I've always just kind of, glazed my eyes over and didn't really dig deeper into what it was. So from there, we actually got an email from out of the blue from not the musician Katy Perry, but the editor Katy Perry, from the History Press, who said, like, hey, you might have something here. Do you want to turn the blog into a book? And I hate to say, because I do in fact work in book publishing, I hadn't thought of it. I had never thought about maybe this could be a book. And sort of revelatory at that moment, that yeah, we could turn this blog into a book. We've pretty much already got some chapters lined out, anyway. So we were really, to use a Kentucky metaphor, off to the races at that point. So the first book, My Old Kentucky Road Trip, was sort of our generalist from the blog across the state. I think we went, we went west to east, or we went east to west, Blair?
We went west to east. We did 25 trips. And we tried to arrange them from like the big things like Mammoth Cave and Cumberland Falls to the really small, like playing a game of Rolly Hole, at a Marble Superdome. So we tried to really to make them big and small. We tried to target them at people who like us. They wanted to us. We wanted them to explore our home state, and we wanted to kind of itch some of those curiosities, and get people out and driving around. It was our goal to give you enough to make you interested, but to really encourage you to go travel yourself. Here are some travel tips. Here's what you're going to see there. But we didn't want to give you we didn't want to spoil it for you, right? We wanted you to get out and do it yourself.
Blair, I really appreciate that your guest star
I
Pumpkin has
know
joined.
this. We could do a whole different lunch and learn on this cat. It is a street cat turned my cat. I
He's
can't.
excellent. He's excellent. So yeah, so then one book begat the next three actually, and we bundled the next three together, and which let me tell you, that was not a super fun moment to write three books at the same time, even if they were sort of meant to be mini guides. But we wanted to go deeper on kind of these iconic themes that we were really discovering. And of course, especially with the Civil War destinations, I really got to be my truest history nerd self, which was excellent. And then from there, there are plenty of road trips still to take and still to share. But we kind of went back to our more generalist roots when we were looking at doing Kentucky Y'all, which is really meant to be more culture, people, all the sort of ephemera and tidbits that were around the idea of traveling to these locations. So we wanted to celebrate accents, sports, certainly food, some of the history stuff. For me as an English person, some of my favorite Kentucky writers, and these were all things that didn't necessarily fit into a road trip framework, but we still wanted to sort of dive in and share. And along with the Elliott photographs, I'll also call out, we worked with an illustrator that Blair had worked with previously, who did all these wonderful hand-drawn illustrations for us throughout this book. And even the entire cover, those are all hand-drawn by her. And I just I can't tell you how obsessed I am with this little state outline and goldenrod motif. I just think beautiful.
I think Elliot still has his feelings hurt that he was not asked to be part of book number
Sorry,
5.
Elliot.
But we feature him in our presentation, so we'll give him that. But yeah, it's a great kind of unique approach. We wanted to set this book apart from the others because the audience we had built and the folks who had read our first 4 really expected road trips out of us. But we had collected all these stories along our road trips, and people would, we would meet people on the road, and they would say, "Have you ever heard of the history of this? Or have you heard about that?" And we were documenting them and logging them, but we didn't have anywhere to put them. We weren't really blogging anymore. We didn't have that regular presence. Our YouTube channel never went anywhere. We never became the influencers that we didn't know we didn't want to be. And so we had this rich collection of what our state history was and how we got here that we wanted to put somewhere. So that's how we got, and we wanted, that's why we did no photos. We wanted these illustrations, by another Kentuckian who just really could bring to life some of the things we were talking about. So we got very lucky in that.
Think about. So we wanted to walk through some of our favorite trips, certainly, and then get at some of these great Kentucky Y'all stories.
Yeah. So, I mean, the reason we're taking you back before we take you forward, right, is because to understand, as you read Kentucky Y'all, you're going to see kind of not the same things come up over and over again, but you're starting to get kind of these same themes and destinations. And one destination has ties in so many different parts, right? And so a lot of this was derived from the trips we took. As I said, we took a lot of notes, we learned a lot of things, and we would hear some of these same stories come up and up. And another part of Kentucky Y'all that we really love is that, Kentucky is full of tall tales. Tall tales kind of became a theme, a whole section of our blog originally when we started, because we would hear these stories and we could research and prove 70% of them.
Fun in that.
But then there was like the 30% that every time you talk to someone, it changed a little. It's like when you go on the bourbon trail and you go to a bourbon distillery and the first place you stop is the oldest and the longest operating in the original this and that and the best. And then you go 20 miles down the road and they're the oldest and they're the longest operating. And you're like, you 3 or 4 in, you're like, someone's not telling the truth. And I have a feeling that none of you are telling the truth, but that's what makes it so fun. And so, we had all these collections, but the road trips, and I always tell folks when I get out and talk about our state, Cameron and I are not historians. Cameron likes to pretend she's a historian.
Mhm.
She's never seen a historical marker she didn't love.
Mhm.
But she's not a historian. I am not a historian. What we are Kentuckians who really want you to get out and explore. So as you start to read Kentucky, y'all, we really want you to kind of hear from some of the road trips we took that inspired some of this, some of our favorites. Hopefully, you will also get to get out and explore some of these places as well. So
Yeah.
we'll start there.
And we can start with my history kick. Oh, come on, Google
Yeah,
Slides. There we
we'll give Cameron the history first.
go. So yeah, so
fun stuff.
the fun stuff, like when we apologize to Illinois because Kentucky is actually the original land of Lincoln.
That's right.
Sorry about you. So obviously, 16th president, Gettysburg Address, Emancipation Proclamation. But I think some of the cool things in terms of the Lincolns and the Lincolns in Kentucky is actually that Lincoln's grandparents moved to Kentucky only about 7 years after Daniel Boone first came through, which I think is a really wild factoid to share. And so that first kind of family homestead is the Lincoln Homestead State Park in Springfield, which is a little closer to where Blair is in Frankfort. And then the Birthplace National Monument, which is Sinking Springs Farm, is out in LaRue County, a little further west, and that is the National Historic Site. So when the Lincolns came to Kentucky, they actually had quite a lot of real estate and land disputes. So there's even another farm on Knob Creek where they lived before they got pushed out to Indiana and then Illinois. And you'll actually pass the Knob Creek farm as well when you're going from Hodgenville to Sinking Springs. And this is where I tell you that my dad does quite a bit of genealogy work. And I'm really ashamed to say that we might have a family member way back when on the tree who may have been part of these real estate disputes that pushed the Lincolns out of Kentucky. So let me apologize for that publicly.
The entire Ludwick family for the fact that Lincoln was a senator from Illinois and not a senator from Kentucky.
Alas.
I will be talking with your father about this.
I'll just keep apologizing. So certainly when you go to the Birthplace Monument, and you can see it in this photo, it is this wild giant Greek revival temple. But there is a cabin inside, which I think is also just worth the fabulous juxtaposition there. Although the cabin, and maybe you've heard this before, is really probably not the real cabin. They'll call it the symbolic birth cabin, which I think is quite euphemistic. But nobody really knows what might have happened to that original cabin. I hope a family member wasn't involved. But after Lincoln was assassinated, DC sent a bunch of reporters down to see if they could find this cabin. But really there have been no evidence. I think there's like one stone that's been found in the ensuing decades that has some initials carved into it that may have been Thomas Lincoln and Nancy, Abe's parents. Timing might be right, but unsure. But it still is certainly worth the trip. And the cabin that they do have in there is still from the 1840s, which would have been sort of period accurate based on the research. The logs definitely came from a cabin somewhere in the area, even if they're just a little slightly different. But in the late,
sorry, Cameron, they did send.
Yeah.
I think it was UK that sent out a group to sort of validate the lag. They had it sent out a forestry group, and they did test to make sure that the logs were period appropriate, region appropriate, to make sure that they were being as accurate as they could with what was left at Sinking Springs.
Well, and you definitely wanted to verify that because whatever logs they did find back in the late 1800s, early 1900s went on tour around the United States. And I think at one point it was part of a Barnum and Bailey setup. I think there was a circus that was building this cabin, traveling to different places, erecting it, tearing it down, taking it again. So supposedly this touring cabin excuse me, it was actually part of a set that they toured, where they toured both the Lincoln cabin and the Jefferson Davis cabin together. And Jefferson Davis, of course, being born only about 100 miles away from where Abraham Lincoln was born as well. So these two touring cabins going around the United States, the logs got quite a bit mixed up. So now, there's no way to know if those logs that came back were part of either one of those cabins, if either one of those cabins was actually part of an original cabin. So it certainly is nice to at least have verification that they're region accurate, and time period accurate. But in early 1900s, the cabin was sent back to Kentucky to become this giant monument, which was actually driven by Theodore Roosevelt and then dedicated by Taft. And there's a really fantastic photo that you can find, and it is on site at the site too, of huge crowds coming for the dedication. And because Taft was so big, it's quite easy to pick him out amongst the crowds.
That's not nice.
Sorry,
That
Bill
was an
Taft.
unnecessary detail.
So some other cool things about the National Monument is it's for our 16th president. It has 16 windows and 16 rosettes on the ceiling. It's got 16 fence poles around the cabin inside, and not quite 16 columns around the exterior, but there are plenty of other tidbits. There are 56 steps that lead up to the building, which is the age of the president when he was shot and killed. So there's all this fun little symbolic symbols to go along with the symbolic birth cabin. And of course, Jefferson Davis was born right down the road. It's a little controversial to talk about, but I do find it wild to tell folks there is a 2/3 size replica of the Washington Monument out in the middle of Western Kentucky. And boy, is it wild to drive by and just see this thing erupting from the ground. And it's quite flat out there in Western Kentucky. So you really get a good view. And we've got the Washington Monument down here on the slide also for scale. And it is a freestanding obelisk, which is quite the engineering feat. It is 351 feet tall, and it is the third largest freestanding obelisk in the United States, and it's actually the sixth biggest in the world. The biggest being, of course, the Washington Monument, and then the second tallest is the San Jacinto Monument in Texas, which I laugh because I moved recently from Texas.
Always bigger in Texas.
Always bigger in Texas. But the bit from my bio actually about telling everybody that everything came from Kentucky first is very true in Texas, because all of these, they've got the Sam Bowie, all of the heroes from the Alamo, they were all from Kentucky and also from Tennessee, but the best ones were from Kentucky.
Cameron, it's Bowie. It's pronounced.
I'm sorry,
Bowie.
It's the basketball player sticks.
You move from Kentucky to these other places. You forget these foundational parts where it's
I've lost it.
Bowie knife.
Listen, it's the basketball player. He sticks.
I know. Sam. That's why you're wrong, because you think about that.
Good old Sam.
It is interesting. We always get mixed reviews when we talk about the Jefferson Davis Monument. I think what's so interesting to us is not to ignore, the very valid controversy around it. It was, I think it was funded by the Daughters of the Confederacy. I mean, it makes sense in many ways, but to think about that, I think it's like 87 miles or something like that between Pembroke, Fairview area where this is, and Hodgenville, where this symbolic birth cabin is. And I mean, you're talking about two individuals who are born, within 100 miles of each other. Obviously, one moves north to Illinois, thanks to Cameron's family, and becomes a senator there. One moves south to Louisiana, and just the different, life that they led. And then obviously the parallels of their life being presidents during the Civil War. And then Kentucky is its border state. I mean, you can't say that there's not just a really interesting element to that of why they're both Kentuckians, why Kentucky stayed a border state, how those two individuals came to where they are. It's just, I think we've always found that really fascinating.
It is a really, really unique thing about our state. And there's a few other monuments around and about. There's of course the Springfield Monument statue. Waterfront Park in Louisville has a series of reliefs of Lincoln
You
throughout various
seen
stages.
Okay, have you seen the monument though, like the statue in bronze of Lincoln
The one
at
in
the
Louisville,
waterfront? Yes, his
yes,
face. It's
it's a
not,
little weird.
it's really weird. It's like if I drew Lincoln or something. I don't know. There's something very wrong with his face. It's just not.
The reliefs are also a little interesting, and there's a particular one where he's shirtless and he's chopping down trees. So
Yeah, it's
I'm not sure
interesting.
where we
It's worth
needed
going to
shirtless Lincoln
see, but it
involved
is
somewhere, but
Louisville has
it's
kind of
fun.
interpreted it themselves, I think, a little bit.
Yeah,
Moment
and of
there.
course, Lincoln is still in the Capitol Rotunda. Jefferson Davis used to be in the Rotunda, but now his statuary is here in the museum in Fairview, which it is a really great interpretive museum. It's worth going, and certainly the view is worth going to see from the top of the monument. You can pay a little fee and ride the elevator all the way to the top, and it is a wonderful, fabulous, historic old elevator. And then you get a really great view around once you get up there.
You pray the whole time you're going up that it's going to come back down.
Like it's still working. It's still working.
Let us know.
Um, so speaking of really Kentucky as a border state, we've had a lot of fun going to some various and sundry reenactments. It really is quite an experience. So Perryville really was the largest battle in Kentucky and was one of the bloodiest in the war. That was in 1862. And back when we were first, blogging early and we were starting to work on the Civil War book, we were really lucky to be at Perryville for the 150th anniversary reenactment. They actually did the 150th in 2016, which is not quite the right math for Perryville specifically in 1862. It was sort of the commemorating the end of the Civil War. But the reenactment usually every October draws around 1,000 reenactors in a really good year. But for the anniversary, you had companies from other states, and they do call themselves companies, like a real military, to come and travel in. And they hosted about 3,000 reenactors for this 150th. And the grounds were hugely expanded, and they used nearly the entire battlefield. Still did not meet the size of the actual battle, which was around 37,000 soldiers, which would be a hell of a thing to bring enough
That would be
reenactors
a
for
lot
to
of
do.
reenactors. That would be a lot.
Would be a lot of reenactors. And if we sat around for the entirety of the reenactment, it would take about 6 hours, which is not the experience that you get today. Don't let that scare you off. It certainly is not what they're doing as they're hosting it. And we, of course, hosted quite a few other skirmishes, Camp Wildcat, Mill Springs, Forts Donelson and Henry, being from Lexington, all of the John Hunt Morgan raids, the Battle of Paducah. And then we've also gone to the Battle of Mumfordville reenactment. And it's so much fun to go and to see the reenactors. And they always set up these living history camps, and they want you to come and talk. And so many of the reenactors are actually reenacting their specific family members or specific people, and the level of detail and knowledge that they put in to sort of step into these roles. And I think actually Blair's daughter ended up with a little piece of a replica Confederate money from one of the reenactments that we
They
attended.
don't break character, which is really
They
fun.
do not
They'll sometimes stay a couple of nights and they still stay in character, which is
camp
really
out.
incredible. I will say, I think we were in Mumfordville for a reenactment, and reenactments are clearly more Cameron's thing. She drags me to many of them. They're very loud.
They are
I
loud.
gave my daughter here the headphones on the slide, but really I could have used them. But the funny thing about Mumfordville is we're there, everyone's in character. There's such attention to detail on the costumes for the women, for the men, and
Buttons, the
I mean
boots,
these little teeny details. And then they're firing these cannons and it's making these crazy noises. And then all of a sudden you hear this like brrr, this noise. You're like, what is that? And it is a drone that they are flying over the reenactment to try to, which I would, of course, incredible footage, like love to see it, but also you're kind of like, it's really hard to get into the moment and into character with the drone like coming in and out and the noise. So it's always fun to see the
Yeah,
worlds
we love a
collide.
juxtaposition.
See the worlds collide. But I mentioned that Cameron is, a bit more into the history, but we try really to, and especially in Kentucky, y'all, we want to make it fun. We want to make learning about Kentucky fun. We hope that as you read through this book, you do kind of take away some of these like entertaining anecdotes, some trivia things, some things that you can go tell, friends and family that they may or may not have known. And so with the road trips, it was the same, right? For every Mammoth Cave or battle and reenactment we wanted to go to, we wanted to also go to Dinosaur World or a mega cavern in Louisville where it's a man-made quarry turned cave, where you can zip line in a cave, right? So we were trying to have a balance of what is the fun stuff. We don't want people to ever, we go out and about a lot, and we don't ever want to meet someone who's like, I'm not really into the history stuff, or I don't really like to hike, and then just kind of dismiss Kentucky as a whole. So we're trying to throw it all in. But Dinosaur World was one of our very first road trips. The same weekend we did Mammoth Cave, we did Cave City, which if you have not done Cave City as a whole, I really encourage you to take a whole weekend and do it. It is a lot of fun. There is a lot packed into like 3 exits on I-65. You can do Mammoth Cave, and it's wonderful. I think I've probably been to Mammoth Cave 20 something times, and every time I go, I learn something new and I love it. But there's also so many other things, and some of them are really touristy and kitschy and silly. But they're also fun. On that trip that Cameron and I took, we slept in wigwams. If you have not stayed in Wigwam Village number 2 in Cave City,
I'll go back to our earlier slide.
I really encourage you to stay there. They are like made of concrete. They're not true wigwams. They have beds inside and bathrooms, showers, indoor plumbing, all the things. You're going the wrong direction.
I know. I was like, what is my?
There they are. But they're arranged in like a circle, and there's so many wonderful people you meet. There's only a few of these in the country. There's one still in Phoenix? Arizona, then Phoenix. Yeah, that Gail and Oprah stayed in on their road trip back in like the early 2000s. But it's worth going just for the fun of it. But also nearby, I think one exit up, you can go to Horse Cave, which has a different experience, different caves there. There's also a Kentucky Down Under where you can go hang out with kangaroos and emus. And two, Kentucky has its own Stonehenge. There is a couple who I think they're in Mumfordville. I think that their daughter passed away, and they were trying to make a tribute to her, and so they built a Stonehenge, and it's technically in their yard on private property that they invite folks to stop by and to see it and spend time there. So Cave City is an incredible stop. But Dinosaur World is one of those things that if you haven't been, you should go. It's really neat. You walk through kind of a nature trail. You can see us.
It's like going to the zoo, but nothing is moving.
But nothing moves. And if something's moving, you're having a problem. But Cameron and I are there in the corner on our very first road trip, and then this other is my daughter back several years later.
She outgrew the hedgehogs.
But this was actually the first one. There are 2 or 3 now across the country. I know there's one in Florida, in Plant City, Florida. But there was a Swedish businessman in town in Nashville, Tennessee. And he was taking a drive from Nashville up through Louisville and on north. And as he went up 65, he saw signs for Mammoth Cave and thought that Mammoth Cave was named for like woolly mammoths. And so he kind of thought this was really cool. He stopped in Cave City. He saw some of the other really unique alpine slides and zip lining and different things, and decided he would open himself a Dinosaur World Park. So he founded that I think in 2002 or 2003, it officially opened, and a couple of years later, the other destination in Florida. Cameron and I have seen it go through a couple iterations. It used to, back in like 2015, maybe 13, 14, 15, sometime around there, be a lot more like creationism and getting into like, were dinosaurs in the Bible and were they on Noah's Ark and all of that. And now it's much more just, walking through a park about dinosaurs. They also originally were painted really wild colors. Yeah. When you walk through, there were like bright orange and yellow, like neon dinosaurs. And when we asked at the office, why they were those colors, their feedback was like, well, you don't know what color dinosaurs were. They could be any color. Which I guess technically is true. But now they are much more the gray that you see here. It's very, Land Before Time cartoon come to life. But it's very, very cool to go through when you're in Cave City, and certainly worth the trip.
It's a good walk.
Another favorite of mine is a combination of experiences. And that's why we always recommend it to folks. You get the history of Kentucky through Cumberland Falls. Dr. Thomas Walker, who actually came into Kentucky before Daniel Boone and his settlers came through, discovered Cumberland Falls, named it after the Duke of Cumberland, where he also named Cumberland Gap, Cumberland River, Cumberland Falls. He wasn't very original. He only knew the one Duke. I'm my version of the story is he only knew the one Duke. No, he named it Cumberland Falls. And this is one of those really cool things that like this was privately owned for a long time. You imagine just like this is on your farm. For those of you who have been to Cumberland Falls, like this is on my back 5 acres. It just is such a weird thing for us to think about, but really, really cool to go and explore the Niagara of the South. If you go at the right time of year with the right conditions, you can see the moonbow, which is really, really neat. The lodge there is great. It used the original lodge. If you're in the current lodge, which is the Kentucky State Resort Park, you can see photos of the original lodge, which literally set like on top of the falls, like really, really close. I guess the original builders didn't really think about erosion or, weather or anything, safety, but it's been moved a little bit away, but it's a great trip to take. This encapsulates a lot of Kentucky history, a lot of the first things discovered when people came through the Cumberland Gap and really they had the mission to settle what was supposed to be the 14th colony that never really became a colony and became part of Virginia instead. And what Kentucky obviously eventually came the first state west of the Appalachian Mountains. And so this was the Great American West before the Great American West. I always like to think about this is Cumberland Gap, not Cumberland Falls, but it took like 170 years for, people to settle on the coast and start to make their lives here, and then to travel through the Cumberland Gap to what is now Kentucky. And they traveled, 3,000 miles in a fraction of that time to the West Coast, because it's the Cumberland Gap that kind of allowed you to come through. And so it's just really incredible to me to think through that. And you get to see that history here at Cumberland Falls. It's also obviously a natural wonder and very impressive. But when you travel to Stearns, Kentucky, which is the community around Cumberland Falls, you get other experiences a lot like Cave City. It's not quite as touristy and kitschy as Cave City, but I would really encourage you, if you're there on a weekend, to go to a trip down the Big South Fork Scenic Railroad. I always say it, Big South Fork Scenic Railroad. Because it's really cool. They have just standard tours that take you into an old coal mining town. It's a kind of not a recreation. The town is there, but they have set up a lot of things so you can see
the former company town.
Yes. And so you get to see all of that. But they also have themed train rides. There's a haunted train ride at Halloween. There is a Polar Express at Christmas. There's moonshine and moonbows, which I've never been brave enough to take, just because I think that anyone can see a moonbow if you have enough moonshines. It just makes me nervous to hang over a waterfall with, I don't know, I get nervous. They have wine tours. They have a lot of really fun things on the train. Plus they're just open air trains that take you several miles down into that area, which
is so beautiful.
It's a really cool trip. We've taken people down. Polar Express was really fun. We've done that one, but we always encourage folks to go there. You can keep through.
Yeah. So we love the road trips. We love talking to people. And actually when we did the Big South Fork Scenic Railway for the first time, we were chatting with a park ranger on a bridge. We saw a bald eagle. Like there were just these wild, these moments that you really want to share with folks and kind of talk about the culture. And so the new book was, like Blair mentioned earlier, like really about pulling those stories out, beyond just road tripping and what else comes along with that. So we wanted to read a couple of excerpts from some of our favorite parts of the new one.
So kind of as we wrap up today, I'm going to read an excerpt from the beginning of the book, because I think it kind of sets the tone for as you all start the book, where we were when we started writing this, kind of what was in our heads, where we were, what we set out to do. So you can kind of, from our perspective, hear about Kentucky. And then we're going to tell you, maybe, I don't know, Cameron, you want to tell like one favorite thing each to kind of give them a teaser for the book, and then we'll answer your questions. I feel like we can find a thing each that we like, maybe. But so this is from the intro, and don't make fun of my reading too bad. This is like popcorn reading in elementary school. Let me find my spot. Okay. At the state's most eastern point, deep in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, it would be difficult to draw a perfect dividing line separating Kentucky from its neighbors. But if you step over that invisible line, Kentucky's tall oak trees and meandering creeks, while similar in appearance to their counterparts in the Virginias, all but close in and quietly encourage your journey westward. Steep mountains and dense forest of the east blend into rolling hills of bluegrass. The roads of central Kentucky are framed by black wooden fences, and grand horse barns dot the horizon. The north has its river towns, the south its rugged gorges. Through cave country and even further west, the flatlands where row crops thrive, you'll realize that Kentucky is as richly diverse as it is lovely. Writer Jesse Stewart called Kentucky America's heart. Pioneer Daniel Boone called it heaven. Kentuckians born here or transplanted, living here or moved away, simply call the state home. Kentucky's complicated history gives us a unique place among the 50 states. It straddled the divide during the Civil War, claims Abe Lincoln as its own against the pretensions of another unnamed state to the north, and is unsure whether to declare itself Southern or Midwestern. And Kentuckians, quite aware of the stereotypes, would like to set the record straight. We do own shoes, even if we aren't always wearing them, and our charming drawl does not mean we're slow-witted. Our thinkers, writers, scientists, musicians, and artists can stand up against those of any state. After all, writers Hunter S. Thompson, Robert Penn Warren, Barbara Kingsolver, Wendell Berry, Bell Hooks, Jesse Stewart, and Bobby Ann Mason are all Kentuckians. So were journalists Diane Sawyer, Alice Dunnigan, Helen Thomas, and Nick Clooney, not to mention his famous sister Rosemary Clooney and his son George. John T. Thompson, inventor of the Thompson submachine gun, better known as the Tommy gun, was born in Newport. Nobel Prize winner Philip Allen Sharp, who co-discovered RNA splicing and considerably advanced research on cancer and hereditary diseases, was born in Falmouth. Garrett Morgan of Paris, Kentucky, invented the first respiratory protective hood, which led to the modern gas mask, and went on to invent the first automatic tricolor traffic signal. We could brag about Kentucky all day, and often we do. This is the last part, I promise. We've been friends since forever and share a passion for travel. We love to get out in the world and meet new people. Several years ago, we decided to begin our explorations in our own backyard and started with places that everyone has heard about. Mammoth Cave, a national park with the world's largest cave system, and Cumberland Falls, fondly known as the Niagara of the South. But soon we found ourselves at the Monroe County Marbles Club Superdome, playing a rousing game of rolly hole in the dirt. We were eating mutton barbecue sandwiches while petting the mayor of Rabbit Hash, a dog, and clutching hands as we walked through a haunted tuberculosis hospital on the outskirts of Louisville after midnight. Over the years, our travels and our travel guides we wrote together have taken us to food festivals and famous bourbon distilleries, to airports and cemeteries, and racetracks and historic monuments, and along the parkways and the back roads as we've met our fellow Kentuckians. We learned things about our neighbors and their communities that we couldn't learn from reading historical markers or maps or history books. We hit the road to see Kentucky, but it didn't take us long to realize that we were really meeting Kentucky for the first time.
Thanks, Blair. So we'll do just a couple of our favorite stories before we get to Q&A, because I know we're running up against some time. I'll introduce you first to Maggie Bailey, who was Queen of the Mountain Bootleggers in Harlan County. Maggie lived to be 101 years old. She started selling liquor when she was 17 to support her family. In her long life of making and selling moonshine, Maggie was brought to court a few times, but she was only ever convicted once, and she did serve 18 months in federal prison. Despite the changing times, her alcohol sales remained illegal until she died in 2005. And Harlan County is still a dry county, not because of Maggie, but it's still a dry county these days. According to an interview with her longtime friend and lawyer, Maggie was like everyone's grandmother, and no jury was ever going to find her guilty. They had to take her to federal court to do that. With no children of her own, she looked after her neighbors, gifting food and coal whenever a family needed it. From her house in Clovertown in Harlan County in her simple print dress and apron, she got to know everyone who drove up to her back door to buy moonshine. Her friend said that she knew the Fourth Amendment, all the search and seizure laws, backward and forward, but she kept to her own code. She never sold to kids or to drunkards, as she called them, and she was never a drinker herself, which I think is amazing. She was beloved in Harlan County, and she was immortalized. You may have seen her namesake in the FX series Justified, starring Timothy Oliphant. In season 2 of the show, the character Mags Bennett, played by Margot Martindale, was inspired by this legendary queen of the mountain bootleggers. Of course, you can now find moonshine just about anywhere, and many of our distillers have added moonshine to their lineups, some of it with added flavors like peach and apple pie. And of course, there are now high-end moonshine cocktails you can get at restaurants and bars. But it might taste better if you have to break the laws to get your hands on it.
Cameron, can you share, just because there are some pop culture fans, the ties to NASCAR?
Yes,
I
absolutely.
don't
So
think that's
yeah,
too much of a spoiler.
No. So NASCAR, let me get back, was really driven by, pun intended, the early bootleggers. So the sometimes called rum runners, who were smuggling moonshine from the hollers and out into the cities. Were trying to figure out how to slip their stock past the police, who were in all these newfangled cars. They were facing rival distillers, nighttime driving through the mountains, and then the prohibition agents who were trying to destroy the distillers or the distributors. So they got really good at tinkering around with these cars, slimming down the mechanics, making space for their crates and bottles, and figuring out how to go faster so that they could outpace police and prohibition agents. In their spare time, they started challenging each other to races. And this is now where NASCAR has built out of this, and this is real. So even after Prohibition ended, folks who were still making and selling their own whiskey were still driving these modified cars around the hills to make deliveries. And future NASCAR Hall of Famer Junior Johnson actually earned his learner's permit while he was running hooch, even post Prohibition. And when the very first Daytona 500 took off in 1948, it was a former rum runner named Red Byron who won the first race. So we are maybe still speeding around, carrying booze forever and always in the legacy.
The only other things I'll highlight really quick, just to look forward to in the book. So we have a section on, kind of famous Kentuckians, but one of my favorite all my favorite parts there are the stories of our inventors. There's so many things invented here in Kentucky. Some things, that mostly true. Some of them we claim. I like all of them. The high five was invented by a U of L basketball player. The happy birthday song was written by substitute school teachers, sisters in, or just school teacher sisters, sorry, in Louisville. The Louisville Slugger baseball bat, obviously, if you've been to Museum Row in Louisville, the very famous many-story bat there. Story of a German immigrant who his son snuck out of work to the ball field, saw a Louisville Eclipse star Pete Browning break a bat over his leg, told Pete Browning that his dad could make him a better bat, took him back to the woodworking shop, made him a bat, and of course he proceeded to be a star. And Pete Browning, if you all are baseball fans, was called the Louisville Slugger, which is where that gets its name. But as I mentioned in the excerpt from the intro, the inventor of the stoplight grew up in Paris, Kentucky. Bib lettuce was cultivated first in Frankfurt by a lawyer who was an amateur horticulturist. Kalen's restaurant in Louisville is where the cheeseburger was invented. We don't care what they say in Denver, Colorado. It was certainly invented in Louisville, Kentucky at Kalen's restaurant. So we just, kind of love all of the histories of these inventions and sort of the minds that are here in Kentucky. And then I think the last part, Cameron, will be we have a whole section dedicated to kind of the phrases and things we say, the origins of the accent. So I'm anxious to see, as you all read through that, if you all agree with some of those sayings, if you've heard of them, if you say them or have family members who say them, if the accent origins make sense to you, because as we first started talking about this with some of linguists, professors and stuff, it was interesting to learn about. So I'm just anxious to see how you all think about that. But a lot to explore, just from everything from traditional, traditions and cultures and ways of dress and talking and cooking and drinking, to some things that we hope you didn't know that you're gonna learn through this.
Yeah, absolutely. I got to tell one more story about my genealogist dad as we're looking at
Okay.
this, how to talk
What
like a
other history
Kentuckian.
did you ruin?
No,
Or
I love one of my favorite stories that he tells. He rushed a fraternity at UK back in the 1970s, and he was going around, early one of the rush nights with his the brother who was escorting him, and he recalls that he met quite a few guys with the name Mac. And it wasn't until he introduced himself later that he actually learned that their names were Mike, and that his escort was just from deep in the hills in eastern Kentucky. So I love he tells that story. It's so great about meeting now, and this is my brother Mac, um, and getting to know the accent because certainly he grew up in Louisville and us growing up in Lexington. It was that was not our accent, but it's wonderful to hear kind of the different flavors around the state.
we are happy to
Oh,
take any questions now. We talk a lot, and
we were blabby.
we go down meandering things sometimes. So happy to answer any questions. This last slide here has Facebook is probably what we update the most when we update. And then I think the other one is Instagram, which we like to share some photos. Tomorrow, the land where we will live is the Cherokee translation of the word Kentucky. So there is a section of the book where we acknowledge that a lot of the history that we share is one version of history, right? When we talk about the first explorers to Kentucky, we very intentionally mean the first white explorers. The history of Kentucky is full of Native Americans who were here first, and many of the conflicts that resulted as people began moving west. So we like to give a nod to kind of those origins, and there's something really beautiful in the thought that that is what Kentucky means to the people who were here.
Yeah, thank you all. But yeah, any questions, any thoughts? Chat with us.
Thank you guys so much. I'll get us started and then I'll open it up to everybody else. So since you've published the book, is there some like nugget of information or place that you've been that you're like, I wish I had been able to get that in the book? Do you have one of those?
So I will say I actually just discovered one that I was like, damn, I wish we had known this for the book. And it's in the funky place names. I had never heard of Tewapity.
Wow.
And yes, and I'm actually gonna post this in the chat. Is spelled, reading it, I would have said, oh, come on, now why is my copy and paste not working? There we go. Gosh. Okay, let me see if this comes through. It might come in through weird because it's now pasted like 3 times. Did that come through?
Yeah, 3 times.
Yeah, in a weird three-peat.
Wapiti.
I would have said Wapiti, but it's actually Tiwapiti, and that's near Elkton in Todd County. Which that was one of these funky place names that I had never heard of. I have actually known a friend who legitimately grew up in Possum Trot, which I think is fabulous in Marshall County. But yeah, I think the place names, and when I've have lived in Texas and North Carolina, those are always like the most fun things to share with other folks. Or don't call it Yosemite, call it Yosemite,
Yeah,
and then they'll know what you're talking about.
We were at 76 Falls, and I just assumed 76 Falls was named because it was 76 feet tall, because that would be legit, like very logical. But it's 84 feet tall, so I don't
Nailed
know.
it.
No, there's a nearby town called 76, so there's that. But Jessica, there's so many. I mean, when we did the first book, we would go out and people would be like, "Oh, have you been to this place or have you heard of this place?" And inevitably the answer was no, which was very disappointing on our part. I think Big Bone Lick State Park is somewhere I went not very long ago. I had been a couple times before, but I spent some very intentional time. Actually, I had been at the Cincinnati Museum Center to the Natural History Museum, and they have a lovely Ice Age exhibit, and they have a huge part about Big Bone Lick in Kentucky in that museum. So we went back, and that I wish was in some of the road trip books. I also wish we did a little bit more like how to travel. I think it's intimidating when people are like, I have to take a road trip. There are 25 trips in our first book, and they're like, I don't have that kind of time. And they don't realize that Cameron and I did them over years. Like we did
Yeah.
them parsed it out. And so I wish we had a lot more information about like how to travel with kids, how to travel with people who of differing abilities who need to access, different points. There's always sayings that I hear that I'm like, dang it, that would have been a good one to add.
That's a good one.
So there's those too.
Yeah, and actually, one just scratching my nerdy itch. Also, I wish we'd included was a little more about space in Kentucky, and talk a little bit about Middlesboro, which is the only town built entirely in a meteor crater.
Yeah, a crater. We also could have talked
Those,
about the green people in Hopkinsville. That we could have gone
yeah,
full
Edgar
alien.
Casey. Yep, we could have done so
Wow,
much.
we could have gone really alien. The
You have
next book.
a queen of Hopkinsville here, Alyssa,
Oh,
who's
okay.
at the Hopkinsville Christian County.
We love that museum, by the
Well, then
way.
Yeah.
Alyssa will know all about the little green men. And how much we could have. I've been down a rabbit hole on night riders lately, Alyssa. I have been like spending way too much time listening to these little recordings about night riders. And my dad is from Western Kentucky. I was actually just in Hopkinsville on Saturday and Sunday this weekend. And so they love to tell their version of things. And the night riders is my latest obsession. That'll be my next book pitch, and Cameron will be like, absolutely not.
It's history. We can do it. We can do it.
Do we have other questions out there?
You know, I always have a question.
He's going to quiz
But
you on the historical markers,
I know.
Cameron.
I'm so nervous now.
no, it's a good question. Don't worry. It's not a gotcha question. In fact, I just want to thank you both for the good work you're doing and for being with us today. And what I love is that this presentation is going to be posted online for people who couldn't make it today so they can see it later. And the question right across, home plate. So I'm very much food oriented when I travel, and it kind of directs where I go, what I do, how I build my schedule. So I was thinking, and I was telling somebody this past Saturday at the dedication for a new historical marker for the birthplace of Ale 81 soda in Winchester as part of their 100th anniversary. I was saying, what does it mean for us to think of Kentucky foodways as more expansive than fried chicken or bourbon? And those things are
Yeah.
both important, but
Yeah.
there's so much more. So my question is, as you all were traveling, what did you learn about Kentucky food that really stayed with you? And are there any memorable meals or, dishes that you tasted that stand out in your mind?
Well, other than the
Absolutely.
fact
Yeah.
that the cheeseburger was invented here, which you really need to
Yes.
note,
Okay.
we have in a whole book called "Famous Kentucky Flavors" about Kentucky food, and we're claiming they're either invented here or perfected here, and hugely a part of the culture. And I think there are restaurants we went to that we'll recommend and experiences, but we always tell people the cliche things like go have a hot brown at the Brown Hotel where that was
Right.
invented.
Right.
Stop by the Harlan Sanders museum, even though it is cliche. Cameron and I used to play a game when we were traveling outside of Kentucky, especially internationally. It was like, how long do you step off the plane until you see a KFC? I mean, usually it was in the airport, right? Like usually that was, and when we meet people, it's like, oh, three things: bourbon, fried chicken, and basketball. And we're like, yep, that's there you go.
Yeah.
But the hot brown, we talk about mutton barbecue a lot because that was a very obviously not. I'm not going to
So
claim to have invented barbecue because they will kill me in North Carolina and Texas and everywhere else.
Well, I'm going to interrupt you there because like one of my favorites are, and when I think about that foodways and especially like related to our travels, it's been about like sharing kind of the important food moments with each other.
Mhm.
And, like Blair's family being from Western Kentucky, like she took me to Farrell's
Mhm.
to get a cheeseburger the way that they do it. But actually, before I moved to Texas, which was the first time I had, lived outside the state, the last thing that we did was go to the International Barbecue Festival
We did. I
out in
did.
Western Kentucky.
We
So that
did.
was like this really great thing, like before going to Texas to be like, I know y'all do beef, but here's this thing that we did.
Well, and with mutton, it was like, there was I love the Kentucky food tide. It's like everything's out of necessity, right? Like the reason that country ham and mutton barbecue are kind of huge in the western part of the state was because there was, for mutton barbecue, was a huge sheep industry. It was a sheep fiber industry. So they harvested for years. And then you had all these old sheep, and nobody wants to just cook up an old sheep. So, low and slow, and you can make it delicious, right? So, and then
Yeah.
country ham, preserving it, making it last longer, and in the pork industry that kind of came after the sheep industry.
Blair,
Get
I think.
in
Oh, go
northern
ahead.
Kentucky,
Yeah,
Geta. So people either love or hate Geta, but
I
it's one of
love it.
those things that it was also, came from the German immigrants who settled in northern Kentucky, and adding something to food to make it last longer, right? Geta is adding like oats and grains to a sausage to stretch it. And I love that the history of food culture here is a lot of those things. Burgoo is a great example, toss in everything you got.
We've got a pretty like PTSD memory of going to the Burgoo Festival
Oh
in
my God.
Anderson
Well, I
County, and
always
it was the
say,
hottest
I
day.
always say too, there's the beer cheese festival is always on the hottest day of the year. And the Burgoo festival is on the second hottest day of the year.
Yeah,
And they're
the like
never
hot
that's never
stew,
different. Because on the hottest day of the year, what do you want to do but eat spicy beer cheese? And on the
obviously.
second hottest day of the year, what do you want to do but stand over the steaming cauldron of Burgoo cooking? And they're like, "Do you want to sample?" And you're like, "No, not even a little bit, but sure, I'll take it."
Yes,
It's awful.
but yes.
But yeah, I think those are things that come to mind. We were really, really driven to go to food festivals. So, the Trigg County Country Ham Festival, the largest ham and biscuit there. Fulton, Kentucky has a banana festival honoring that refrigerated rail car that brought bananas north and into America more. That one's really cool in Fulton, Kentucky. Mountain mushroom. I mean, there's just so many. The food festivals are incredible here, and we always tell people to go there to experience those.
Yeah.
I will tell you all, you are among a very famous person. I was asked to judge the beer cheese festival this year in Winchester, possibly the honor of my
I'm
life.
so jealous.
Don't tell my husband or my child, but definitely the honor of my life. I will say I was needed to manage expectations though, because when I got there were 34 entries in the professional category. And I didn't realize, I don't know why, that you weren't going to be able to eat it with like a cracker or something. It was just like spoonfuls of beer cheese. So I have to say that was early June. It is now early August. I have not had beer cheese since. I'm not saying I never will. I'm just saying it was a lot. But I would go back if they
I
ask.
love it. Well, and I want to throw out two cookbook recommendations as well for like exploring. I love Ronnie Lundy's Vittles.
Mhm.
And Ronnie just as like a magnificent chef and food writer from Corbin. That one's magnificent. And I think that book came out actually when we were doing one of our book fairs. And so that was really special. And especially in Appalachian foodways specifically. I also really love, and I started my career at the University Press of Kentucky, which did our latest book, and got to know the Bluegrass Cookbook. And it's bluegrass, two words, not one word. And that was gosh, is it Minnie Fox, I think, who helped compile that. But it's actually recipes from her Black cook in the kitchen who I can't remember if she was formerly enslaved or who had come from a formerly enslaved family. And it is also this like really kind of wonderful throwback to like, yes, not all foodways are white foodways or Appalachian foodways. But it's this really nice preservation of a lot of those traditions that we carry on. So yeah.
We also haven't talked a lot about bourbon this talk, but bourbon, huge part of kind of Kentucky, so obviously what we do too. But Bourbon Land by Edward Lee is like a pseudo cookbook, has a lot of recipes in it. Of course, adopted Kentuckian Edward Lee, but also kind of a love letter to bourbon too. So I love that because it's got kind of a combination of both, and obviously a nod to our native spirit.
If you let us keep going, we'll do another
I know
45 minutes on
we'll
food.
Stop. Next we can go on and on.
No,
Awesome.
it's
Thank
really
you.
great. Yeah, thank you guys so much. And I guess I have one more thing. We haven't talked a lot about music, but of course, music is so important in Kentucky culture. So, do you have like favorite spots or sites for music lovers here in Kentucky?
Gosh. I mean, I always tell people go to like Renfro Valley and
Renfro, yeah.
do, the true historic Appalachian piece. I love the tale of the mountain dulcimer coming across and kind of the origins of that. So
I'll throw it actually at UK. If you go into the Fine Arts Library, they have a museum of musical instruments, and in particular, sort of these historic dulcimers that have come through, which I think is really kind of wonderful. I also love, now that I'm driving from North Carolina back up. I actually love driving through the Cumberland Gap, going from Asheville up through the Cumberland Gap, certainly along the Kentucky Country Music Highway. Go see Butcher Holler, drive through Jackson, home of Sturgill Simpson. It's hard not to see the Dinosaur World slide earlier and not think of Tyler Childers doing a concert at Dinosaur World with the whole band dressed up like Jurassic Park. And I was actually
Sorry, go
lucky
ahead.
enough, working on another book with another author who did an event in conversation with S.G. Goodman, who's from near Possum Trot, actually, out
Yeah,
west. So
we say that a lot near Possum Trot. I also will just end on this, Jessica, which is possibly our most infamous road trip, if not, it's definitely not famous. Cameron and I were in Central City, Kentucky, home
yes,
of John Prine and the other, well, not home of John Prine, but ode to John Prine through his song Paradise. And home of the Everly Brothers. Cameron loves a good cemetery, so Cameron was on a quest to find the Everly Brothers headstone because something
one
she
of
liked
them,
to do.
only one of them was dead at that
Only one
point.
of them was dead. Sorry. So we're on that quest. I think we found it. A little bit of a not exciting situation. So there is supposed to be a museum in town. So we are driving in circles looking for said museum. Give up at this point because the directions were like, past the post office, turn on the third street, go up to we were lost. And it's hard to get lost in Central City. Uh, so we stopped at the McDonald's to get a drink, get back on the road. And there inside the McDonald's are like all these display cases full of Everly Brothers memorabilia. And so we were like, are we in the museum?
Museum, the
As it
McDonald's
turns
Museum of
out,
Everly Brothers music.
so as it turns out, we find out later. At the time, we were like, we found the museum. It's the McDonald's in town. So we are like, you have to go to the Central City McDonald's to go to the Everly Brothers Museum. But really, they were relocating buildings. They had stuff located there. They had graciously agreed to host it. Now, if you go, there is a wonderful museum in Central City to the Everly Brothers and also to John Prine. They have two great statues of them. It's a great experience. But I fondly remember the McDonald's Museum, which is maybe my second favorite food museum, second only to Colonel Sanders.
That was actually a two for grave exploration trip because I also dragged Blair to go see Alvin Barkley while we were out there.
Yeah,
They're close
we
by.
go to a lot of cemeteries against my will. I have a feeling that when we die, Cameron will also take me to a cemetery against
Yes,
my
correct.
will. That will be how I
Correct.
end. She'll just drag me with her.
Well, this has been absolutely a delight. Thank you both for your time. And we really enjoy the book, and I'm sure some more of us will be diving into it even more after this great presentation. So just thank you so much for your time.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you all. Enjoy. Let us know if you have questions.
Absolutely. And thank you all for joining us today. And be sure to check out the recording of this if you want to come back and hear this great information again. Bye,
Appreciate ya.
everybody.
Bye.